Story 1. Back in my early 20s, a guy at my work, who was the owner's son and about my age, asked me, "What is your favorite season to visit Italy?" I had just graduated from college and had never left the United States. He was completely sincere when asking me. It never occurred to him that some people might not travel to Europe regularly. Story 2. I went to school with a girl who has never had a job. She was an only child, and her grandparents were very wealthy. When they passed away and her father also passed, she inherited a substantial amount of money. Now in her 30s, she is living her best life without having to work, as her bank account allows her to relax and enjoy her time. She travels frequently and owns a beautiful home. Story 3. If you examine extracurricular activities, you can gauge a person's wealth. If they lack extracurriculars, they may come from a less affluent background. Most families with greater means encourage their children to participate in activities such as sports or music. Participation in extracurricular activities that are not easily accessible is often an indication of wealth. Activities like horseback riding and boating are examples. Always remember that achieving proficiency in any skill requires time, money, and dedication. Story 4. They can afford to buy things they want without first calculating costs. I had a wealthy friend who once said sadness was a choice and money does not guarantee happiness. Do you know what is worse than being sad and wealthy? Being sad and poor. So yes, money can contribute to happiness. For instance, I would love to be able to afford meat this month, but I am vegan purely because I am financially constrained. Story 5. They don't work. They travel all the time. They don't understand what it means to struggle. They have assets that most can only dream of having. Story 6. No fear of consequences, no worries or anxiety before doing anything like traveling at a moment's notice, and never having to worry about where they will live or if they will be able to buy a car when they return. Story 7. I believe you can easily tell if someone has a family safety net. For instance, if they lose their home, job, or partner and need a spare room to stay indefinitely while they get back on their feet. Story 8. They seem to live in several places. I was acquainted with this person and had her as a friend on Facebook. Every other month, I would see photos of her and her partner living in a different tropical country. Their life seems to revolve around travel and bouldering. Another example is a colleague of mine. She would share stories from her early 20s about how many countries she lived in for several months. She could go wherever she pleased, and when she returned to Canada, she could stay with her dad for a while before setting off again. When I was that age, such options were not available to me. I had to focus on school and work to help support my dad. Story 9. If you see someone urinating in public, they are either too poor to have a choice or too rich to care. All that glitters is not gold. Outward appearances are the worst possible indicators of wealth. Expensive items often indicate a poor past and current middle-class coping. Shoppers at the mall lining up at the Gucci store are by no means wealthy people. Malls cater to the lower and middle classes of society. Gucci is certainly not for the wealthy. There are no signs unless you get to know them. If you are not rich, you won't get to know the rich. Story 10. I am for money and attend a private school usually frequented by diplomats. There is a divide between the foreigners and the affluent. I belong to both groups. The biggest difference I have observed is that the wealthy are not feminists. They have everything and do not care about having limited rights in our country. Money is the ultimate political power. One does not need to vote. Interestingly, the wealthy also lack hobbies, which is strange given their resources. Story 11. Regular international family trips. I am in my 20s and eager to start traveling internationally. I never realized how much money it costs to travel, especially with a family. University or college tuition is often cheaper than high school tuition. They live on an equestrian estate. You never split the bill with them. They are always willing to cover your expenses, even when you insist that you don't want to go out, regardless of your financial situation. They and their siblings all receive cars when they reach driving age or obtain their licenses. They can travel to the other side of the country on short notice. They attended a private school. They do not struggle to pay for college or university tuition. They are not interested in specials or bargains. Story 12. They have furniture, clothing, and homes that are over 200 years old, yet they look new because they are well cared for. They prioritize sustainability and focus on fulfilling the needs of those around them instead of contributing to fast fashion and using low-quality materials. These items are freely stored and passed around within the family. They eat simpler meals made from high-quality ingredients, served in smaller portions, and happily share their table with anyone in need. They actively seek out philanthropic efforts with their personal funds as frequently as they invest in scholarships. They take the time to spend in spaces where privilege is absent and are humble about the circumstances of birth that afford them their advantages. They are punctual and communicate clearly and frequently because they value the time and responsibilities others depend on and do not seek to exploit for their own gain. Well, you did say wealthy, not rich. Story 13. The glow on their face is different. One can immediately sense it through their fragrance. If they are classy, the way they interact, even in unpleasant situations, is also elegant. Story 14. Confidence and a carefree attitude can signal wealth. Affluent individuals in college often appeared more relaxed because they did not have the pressure of worrying about failure. Story 15. They spend 6 years in college studying science, stitching together a group of corpses, and fail to take any responsibility when their abandoned, reanimated creation seeks revenge on them. Story 16. Those from wealthy families usually delegate tasks, while those from low-income families tend to handle everything on their own. Story 17. They do not fear anything in day-to-day life. Even if they work and pay for their own expenses, they know they will never be hungry or left with a broken car. I was friends with a few people in college. Wealthy here doesn't mean part of the top 1%. It simply means their parents had enough money to cover everything if needed. The friends I had still had to work. They had roommates. One was my roommate. They drove used cars and budgeted their spending money for outings. But you noticed the difference. They weren't worried about unexpected bills or being fired. They always had a safety net. Story 18. They've reached college, and their parents are still paying all their bills for them, including tuition and fees, car insurance, housing, and more. My friend comes from such a family. He's very nice, but he is quite naive. Story 19. My boss was asking me when I would stop renting and buy a house. He said, "You can get a decent place for 1.2 million, but you might as well spend 1.6 to get a good house." I asked him if he needed a reminder about my salary. Story 20. They cannot solve even the slightest problems for themselves. My wife's former boss was a wonderful woman but came from New York City old money. She was going to call for roadside assistance because one of her tires had a low-pressure light on it one day. Her shop was 50 yards from a gas station with an air pump, and she had no idea what it was, much less how to use it. Story 21. Not understanding why people have to make hard choices because they can't afford everything they might need. Story 22. I had a roommate in graduate school who had never cleaned anything in her entire life. She truly had no idea what to do when it was her week to clean the bathroom. My favorite part is that she would cook herself a big dinner and make a mess in the kitchen, then return an hour later and complain that it was still messy. I know life without help can be challenging. Story 23. This phenomenon becomes noticeable in your mid-20s. An individual who never seemed to have any kind of job suddenly emerges from college or graduate school with an impressive job title. A person who has never worked a day in their life suddenly becomes a financial analyst. Story 24. If they are really wasteful during cooking, I went on a trip with someone who threw away 2 bagels from a pack because they did not want to pack them to bring home. It boggled my mind. Story 25. They act like they have been here before. What I mean is, they will be in an extremely upscale, high society environment, but nothing surprises them. They do not express amazement at the decor or the details. They do not act awkward when served food that may require special dining skills, such as oysters or escargot. They have experienced this before. If someone is in their 20s or 30s and owns a house, especially one in a nice area, it is likely their family helped them acquire it. This is not something most people are open about. Story 26. I was working at a hardware store when a middle-aged man asked me how to attach a garden hose to a spigot, as he had never done it before. He said, "I have people for that." Story 27. I remember going to someone's house where they served steak for dinner. It was the first time in my life I had one all to myself, and it still stands out to me. Story 28. They are always outside doing enjoyable activities. A coffee, a pancake, a snack on the way home. Small expenses that I cannot afford as someone with limited financial resources because they accumulate over time. Story 29. I realized that most of my coworkers came from wealthy families when, on more than one occasion, they coincidentally ended up at the same expensive resort in Montana with their families on the same weekend. When you reach certain levels of corporate leadership, having wealthy connections is almost expected. My family could barely afford a basic vacation. Story 30. I think the concept of wealth varies. For me, it was when my friends at school went on vacations abroad, as my parents couldn't afford that. They all seemed wealthy to me. Story 31. They do not appreciate the things they have and do not take care of their belongings. They know they can always get new items if something breaks. Spoiled children often become spoiled adults. Story 32. Casual confidence that everything will always be taken care of for them. They never worry about anything. Story 33. Skiing is a regular part of conversation, and the activities their young children do for birthdays are experiences that some people will never have in life. Story 34. My sister-in-law's family is wealthy. I realized this when I visited their home in the Hamptons, where they mentioned deciding to sell their house in London and their ski resort home in Colorado. Instead, they purchased a small apartment on the Upper East Side of Manhattan and a vacation home in Florida. Honestly, they are really nice people. I love them a lot. Story 35. I have a friend who comes from a wealthy family and inherited money from his grandmother, father, and mother after they passed away. He eats out every day, sends his laundry out, and often expresses a desire to visit Denmark or Switzerland for a couple of weeks. He somewhat lives below his means, but he has the mentality of never needing to work and remains out of touch with that reality. Story 36. My cousin is dating a girl who drives a brand new Mercedes EQS. I asked her how much it costs each month. She told me it was around $200 a month, only accounting for the monthly insurance. She bought the car in full at signing, and she did not know about the monthly car payments. Her family owns a hospital in Japan, and she is an only child. She is almost 35 and has never held a real job. Instead, she has been in school since she was 20. It's not like she has been changing her major either. She has 2 Bachelor of Arts degrees, a law degree, and is currently pursuing her medical degree. She said her hobby is just school. Here's the kicker. When we go out to dinner, we always split the bill and she never contributes to the tip. It is not a cultural thing. She has been in the United States for about 15 years. Story 37. A friend of mine from college, who attended a private school in Paris that was more affordable than American private education, was always running errands between multiple homes in Paris, despite not being French. These homes are located in prime real estate areas. Interestingly, the first time I visited her in her home country, she accommodated me and a friend in one of her family's vacation homes. The next morning, we were running late for a boat trip she had planned. Once we arrived at the yacht, I discovered it was her family's boat, and the crew was helping us aboard while I was completely stunned. I was pleased to be able to afford food delivery. After some swimming, everyone was hungry. They arranged for food to be delivered, and later, a smaller dinghy came to drop off some of her friends while the yacht was anchored offshore. Story 38. Being able to become the richest person in the world through acquisition, without having created anything through your own hard work or ingenuity. Story 39. Their table manners are commendable. They will not wear a hat at the table or wipe or blow their nose. Instead, they will excuse themselves to do so. They will not reach excessively for the salt and pepper but will ask politely. They will use their fork and knife properly, holding the fork with the handle turned upside down and using their pointer finger on it while cutting with the knife in the other hand. They will not sip soup loudly. They will compliment the main course, mention something about their family, and then politely inquire with the hostess about the dish. If they need to excuse themselves before finishing their meal, they will lay the silverware down parallel on the dish. If they have finished, they will place the silverware crossed on their plate. They will use proper English if it is their native language, express gratitude, and compliment the side dish, but will politely decline if it is not to their taste. They will ask engaging questions to all guests to keep everyone involved, and none of this will feel difficult for them. Their cell phones will remain off, and after the meal, they will ask the host if there is anything they can do to help clean up. Story 40. Ici en Belgique, je reconnais facilement les personnes très hautaines qui regardent les autres de haut avec dédain et ne disent pas bonjour. Story 41. My friend's parents paid him around the average salary in my country, so he wouldn't drop out of school. He doesn't believe he's rich even though his dad has 3 new Mercedes. Story 42. Rich, local private school, approximately 20,000 to 40,000 USD per year, excluding extracurricular activities. Wealthy, Swiss private boarding school, approximately 100,000 to 200,000 USD per year, excluding extracurricular activities. Story 43. They often discuss trips that require years of savings and they go every year. They talk about the cars they drive, getting a new one every few years, similar to how they upgrade their phones. I suppose many of them are also in debt. Story 44. They don't have a favorite top ramen. These individuals are usually timid when the heated conversation about microwave versus stove arises. Story 45. Having a name in a family that has no relation to actual names is interesting. For example, someone named Robert Edward Jones might be known within his family as Hal. I have only noticed this among very wealthy individuals. Story 46. Someone who drives a 10 to 20-year-old Bentley, Rolls-Royce, Aston Martin, Range Rover, or Porsche is likely not using it as a lease or rental car, indicating long-term financial commitment. Given its age, many banks are hesitant to finance such vehicles. However, maintaining an older luxury car can sometimes cost more than a modern equivalent. Additional points are awarded if the car is always clean and the bodywork is in good condition. Story 47. Oh no, here as well. We basically don't have anything to fill the protein aspect that you would usually have in your diet except for baked beans. It's not intentional. Story 48. They don't know when payday is. They might work like you and I, but they never pay attention to when the next time we all get paid is. Story 49. When they encounter an issue, their first response is often to throw money at the problem or pay someone else to deal with it. Travel delays? Buy another ticket. Leaking sink? Call a plumber. Stained shirt? Throw it out and buy a new one. Story 50. When you park illegally because the convenience of not walking an extra couple of feet is worth the $50 parking ticket. Story 51. Never being in a rush is something I had not realized until I dated someone from a well-off background. He never seemed stressed about getting anywhere. In contrast, I was always rushing to be somewhere or worried about missing something. Even when he was late, it did not seem to bother him. Story 52. My son had a friend in college who day traded every day before class from 7:30 a.m. to 9:30 a.m. Mountain Standard Time. The wealthy friend lived off his day trading earnings and paid for his classes with that income. This friend advised my son to borrow $25,000 from me, invest it in Nvidia, and hold on to it for 6 months. My son doubled his investment and paid me back. This happened a couple of years ago. The wealthy friend learned day trading from his father to become financially independent and paid for a Hyundai Sonata in cash. Story 53. They are wealthy, but they constantly talk about the deals they find or how they shop sales at Target or how much they love lower-tier brands, almost as if they are slightly embarrassed by their wealth and want to seem more relatable. While not necessarily a bad quality, it can be annoying after a while when they are wearing Louis Vuitton or driving a Porsche. Story 54. Here is my list. They attended a private school. They have a degree but no higher education loan debt. They have worked for more than a month at a time in an unpaid internship. They quit a job without having another one lined up. They have extensive international travel experience. They do not understand the struggles of those who are less fortunate. If they cannot joke about getting exactly $10 worth of petrol in one pour, have not experienced the occasional meal of instant noodles or baked beans, have never sneaked into a cinema, and do not understand why homeless individuals use cardboard, it highlights their lack of awareness. I grew up poor, experienced homelessness for a brief period, and now work in a field surrounded by many privileged individuals. Story 55. Kids in sports clubs, private coaches such as basketball shooting coaches, are willing to host parties without hesitation. Women appreciate nice purses, understated jewelry, and glowing skin with no makeup. They enjoy having nice sunglasses and fresh flowers in a vase weekly in the kitchen. Kids exhibit impeccable manners regardless of age. It is hard to find a television in the house. There is always a dedicated library room, and every bedroom has access to a bathroom. The house includes a half bath and a full bathroom on the main floor, allowing for a ranch-style living option if desired. Additionally, there are laundry rooms, one upstairs and one on the main floor. Story 56. They are not concerned about the price of eggs and think it is no big deal that the American people will go through a recession because they do not understand what that means for the average person. Story 57. Work ethic. They always want to do a lot, but often back out of anything that requires real effort and dedication because they can afford not to engage in those tasks. Story 58. X came from an upper-middle-class family, not overtly wealthy, but well-off and from the most affluent neighborhood in my city. I needed a rug for my apartment and wanted to check out IKEA. He was shocked I would buy it from IKEA when we could get a really nice one from Turkey one day and have it flown home. Not that we had any plans to go to Turkey. Another instance was when he scoffed at the idea of someone going on a cruise vacation when they could just charter a yacht. I searched for the price for that, starting at around $15,000, and I expressed to him that it was not very affordable. He said it could be done if a few people pitched in. Mind you, he did not act or look wealthy in any way, nor did he live that lifestyle. 35 years old, living with roommates, drinking, smoking, and traveling. I left him when I asked about utilizing a registered retirement savings plan for purchasing a property. He was not aware of how that worked or had any knowledge about retirement savings at all, despite both of his parents being bankers. Story 59. I have noticed that some people, especially those from wealthy families, tend to exude confidence. I would not say it borders on arrogance, but they seem to have almost everything they need and have not had to struggle. As a result, they grow up well-adjusted. Their environment plays a significant role in shaping their self-esteem, such as attending prestigious schools and mingling with individuals from the upper class. If these families are wealthy, perhaps the older generations influence the younger ones, imparting similar traits. Story 60. I grew up next door to a famous athlete's child. We were friends, and he had random automobiles scattered throughout his basement. Gloves, shoes, and cards were just housed like regular items. No big deal. Story 61. They have always had the option to eat within 12 to 24 hours. If they were truly starving without access to food, it would hopefully teach them about the experience of being poor and lacking guaranteed access to nourishment. Story 62. I attended a small women's college 30 years ago. I grew up in poverty. When my mother gave the school $250 to hold my room, it was essentially our rent for the month. We didn't have cable or a phone. You get the idea. I was able to go to college on a scholarship. There were girls moving into the dorm arriving in limousines. It was quite a scene, but the more significant moments were those that occurred in class. Most classes had about 10 students, and this is still the case. The Rodney King incident happened during my freshman year. I was in my history class discussing current events. That lecture class had 25 students. I sat there silently until I was about to explode. Students were talking dismissively about people who steal, suggesting they should simply buy what they need. They could not grasp how some people cannot afford basic necessities or understand the injustices in society. We live in a world that is unequal for everyone. Ironically, my middle child chose the same school, which is now coeducational. In their senior seminar, they faced a similar issue. They discussed what life would be like working in their field as an art therapist. Their classmates were focused on how to decorate their offices, while my child wanted to explore how to structure graduate school for counseling so insurance companies would accept billing for services as an art therapist. Story 63. Whenever my wealthy friend and I were out shopping and I found a piece of clothing I liked that was within my budget, Kim would tell me to buy more than one piece. I didn't have that luxury. Story 64. The few truly wealthy people I have met, who were all over 40, did not display their wealth. Their clothes looked nice but did not have brand names on them. They were genuinely pleasant to converse or work with. One man was still driving the same 1980s Mercedes he bought used in the 1990s as a retirement gift to himself. In contrast, some wealthy individuals want to be noticed, yet they may be living off credit. They can be rude and entitled, driving expensive cars and carrying designer bags every season with brand names prominently displayed. Story 65. Great shoes, paying for school with interest from their investments, not knowing that not everyone does that. Story 66. They bring a bottle of wine from the year you were born to your first date. It was delicious. Story 67. They are unusually relaxed about expensive items, travel frequently, and have connections that create unexpected opportunities. Story 68. Where I come from, you can hear it in the way people address each other, including family. You can discern their social class from their language. Story 69. I have a friend who is extremely wealthy but doesn't necessarily act like it, as his mother grew up middle class and wouldn't allow him to. However, he frequently speaks about his cousins who hold multiple degrees from expensive universities and do not work, instead choosing to vibe all day, as he puts it. Story 70. My wife's cousin has very wealthy parents. Occasionally, we receive some classic comments from her, as she has no idea how hard it is to earn money. Here are the best ones so far. We were complaining about how much long-haul economy flights are uncomfortable. Oh, I know. Why don't you just fly business class? Another time we were talking about cars. She mentioned that she needs to upgrade every year. We commented that one of our cars is almost 20 years old, and she was shocked, saying, "Why would you do that to yourself? I'm happy to take your 1-year-old Range Rover off your hands for free next time." Story 71. My significant other came into some money and has no idea how to maintain or minimize impact in a house. They put all kinds of waste down the sink and have no knowledge about the hot water heater, cleaning, and maintaining the dishwasher or laundry machines. When something broke or went wrong in my childhood, it was often catastrophic. I may not be able to fix much, but I can certainly use things in a way that extends their lifespan. Story 72. Having a basic vacation house in a splendid location features one bathroom, detailed instructions for operation, a tricky stove, crooked floors, and windows and doors that either don't open or close. It also offers a view of Lake Tahoe, Nantucket Sound, or the Eiger. Grandpa won it in a poker game in 1950. Story 73. You know Dickie from The Talented Mr. Ripley? Or even the show Ripley? That character is the perfect representation of the traits of a person from a wealthy family. His relaxed personality, carefree demeanor, a touch of naivety, and countless valuable possessions lying around that he doesn't seem to notice or care about demonstrate a life without the need to work while wealth continues to flow in. He travels anywhere on a whim, makes impromptu plans for vacations, and owns or rents villas or bungalows in various locations. His fine clothing and accessories fit him perfectly. It's not even showy. It feels so natural to him and yet is obvious to an observer. Everything about him makes me truly wonder if this is what wealthy people must be like. Story 74. Typically, it is how they talk. There is so much privilege that they really don't understand real struggles. They may have a tendency to question others or poke fun without realizing that people are doing what they have to out of necessity. Story 75. I chatted with a woman who asked if I wanted to come to Europe for the summer. I misunderstood her and thought she was asking if I wanted to visit Europe during the summer. I replied that I had a couple of weeks of vacation left, so if we were still hanging out, sure. She gave me a strange look and clarified that she meant for the whole summer, as her family has a house in Europe. I think she said it was in Austria, but I'm not certain. This was a few years ago. Story 76. I don't understand why I can't take a couple of weeks off work for vacation. Even if they cover the costs for lodging and flights, They don't realize that missing work for that long is not feasible for most people. I cannot afford to miss those paychecks for my regular living expenses. Additionally, some jobs do not allow you to take extended leave and still have a position to return to. Story 77. My boss said that it feels like the people in this office didn't grow up with a dishwasher and that everyone needs to learn how to properly stack it. I, being 40, got my first dishwasher 7 years ago and responded that I would like to see how it's done. I never had a dishwasher while growing up, and I could never afford to rent a place that had one. It wasn't until I finally bought a house that I paid for a dishwasher to be installed. Story 78. They always seem to have a good position in a successful company, or they do not work at all but can afford everything. Story 79. Maybe not wealthy, but my girlfriend came from a family where money wasn't a problem. My girlfriend has zero understanding of using money properly, and apparently the most expensive things are the best. This starts with groceries and ends with electronics. It doesn't bother me much. It just amazes me often. Story 80. They rely on others to do things for them too much. I've noticed that the ones I know always call their fathers for everything, and the father is usually someone who gets someone else to do it for them. Story 81. They live in an apartment next door to you, and they look at you with a puzzled expression when you discuss how you are paying rent this month with your partner. Source: the guy became a good friend that night instead of just a friend. Story 82. They regularly host fundraisers, 2 to 6 per month, and consistently donate. The donations typically range from $5,000 to $100,000 each. Story 83. They belong to a prestigious country club, usually the oldest and most established one in their city, and refer to it as the club. Story 84. I don't think it's really possible to get any clear signs. You can think about expensive cars and homes in nice neighborhoods, but some people may have expensive tastes without necessarily being wealthy. I have a friend who ridiculed my 2008 Toyota Prius. When I mentioned I wouldn't buy a car for over $20,000 and that it needed to be in decent condition, he mocked my decision. It is what it is. He is a good friend, but he has expensive tastes. He became a doctor, which allows him to afford many unnecessary things that will just create more bills. On the other hand, some people try to avoid high expenses that could affect their investment contributions. They make do and invest significant amounts of money instead. You might not notice them because they drive decent cars and live in average homes. They appear to be everyday people and may not worry about collecting their paychecks. If we're talking about extremely wealthy individuals, they may be able to afford luxury items and upscale apartments. Story 85. Gap years and summers often lead to wasted food. Some individuals barely have to lift a finger to achieve success in life due to their family's connections. Yet they believe they worked extremely hard for their accomplishments. Story 86. Currently, I am living with some affluent friends from wealthy families. Food waste. Disposing of solid food portions or preparing excessive food that goes uneaten is not seen as a significant issue. Constant traveling. There is frequent discussion about past and future travels, including multiple international trips each year and random excursions as if they are trivial. Random purchases. They often buy new, expensive gadgets and technology, which are only utilized for a month before being abandoned. Lack of practical skills. They struggle to interact with tradespeople, often feeling they are being taken advantage of because they do not grasp the practical mechanics involved. Poor cleaning skills. They lack basic cleaning abilities. Narrow perspective. They have an unbalanced view of how most everyday people live, showing disinterest in typical concerns. Casual conversations. Much of the informal dialogue revolves around wealth creation and financial matters. Primary focus. Their main interests include the activities of other wealthy individuals and the subtle power dynamics within that social sphere. Story 87. I come from a relatively wealthy family. Not the top 1%, but definitely somewhere around the top 10% in my home country of France. Now that I'm older, I've realized many of my habits and ideas were influenced by my social origins. I won't repeat cliches like driving an expensive car or wearing designer clothes, as those are too obvious and sometimes not true. Here are a few reflections based on my experience. Being particular about food. I was very picky for a long time, associating cheap food with literal trash and preferring to skip a meal rather than eat it. I have relaxed my standards a bit, but I still struggle with foods like hot dog sausages or any kind of ready-to-eat canned meals, not realizing that most people do not own their homes debt-free. My grandparents purchased both their house and my mother's house without borrowing money, and my dad did the same. It seemed normal to me until I discussed it with friends in high school. Not worrying about small debt, such as credit card debt, I used to think, what if I'm slightly in the red? I don't care. Money always comes back. And if I'm really struggling, I can always ask my family for help. Now that I earn my own income and am not as wealthy as my family, I sometimes find this mindset challenging. Having traveled a lot, this is obvious. You need money to travel, which isn't always easy to come by in your teens and early 20s. Being surrounded by people of the same social status. I don't fully understand this, but I know it has to do with having similar educational and cultural references. I often unintentionally find myself in the company of wealthy individuals. Not all of my friends fit this description, but many do. It was never planned, and I only discovered it as our relationships deepened. There are probably other influences I don't recall right now, but I'd like to add that individuals from wealthy backgrounds, not necessarily wealthy themselves, aren't always politically aligned in one direction. I personally identify as a leftist and have always held those views, while some of my friends are quite neoliberal. Story 88. Not knowing how to do basic cleaning and chores around the house, such as using a vacuum, duster, or lawnmower. Story 89. They have the same job as you, yet every year they take multiple luxurious international family vacations while you can't even afford to pay your heating bill. Story 90. I grew up in Hong Kong. A college classmate of mine had a horse. She attended boarding school during high school, and her parents established scholarships for children to complete their studies. Story 91. I grew up in a well-off family. The first thing I noticed when interacting with others was that many things I considered normal are actually privileges. Having a paid car, access to a credit card for emergencies, good health insurance, and peace of mind knowing that you have a backup plan in case life doesn't go well. Any kind of mid-range or luxury products or purchases. Being able to travel to multiple states and stay at expensive resorts. And the big one is being completely oblivious to the struggles of others around you. I no longer have access to most of these since my dad passed away. I am immensely thankful for the few things I do have, and I have learned to care for and maintain them. Honestly, I wouldn't change it. I am more aware of other people and I've learned a lot. Although I'm struggling, I am free to think for myself and I have found friends and a partner whom I never would have met otherwise. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.